Imagine, Episode 9, by Bernard King and Nicholas Lumarine. Jerome meets Jemma's gigolo. Nicholas accuses Jemma of having an affair, brutally. The corner of the folder caught the zip as she closed her bag. Slowly, the zip flicked open, allowing her to pull out the manuscript. She had read the all-seeing words 10 times, and reading them again could change nothing. She folded the cover and replaced the folder in her bag. It was 6 o'clock. Nicholas would be already peering through an alcoholic mist by now. If she arrived home too early, he would pick a row. She would be better off waiting another hour until his mist had thickened to a fog and he had fallen asleep. She chose the restaurant she always went to with Nicholas, but not to have dinner. She would have a quiet drink at the bar, kill an hour, then go home to the smell of stale alcohol and snores. A diamond-clear glass of gin and tonic held her gaze and her thoughts. Her affair with Jerome was progressing. She had not intended to have sex with him so soon. Her idea was to stretch anticipation until he was screaming with frustration. Now, that part of her fun was over. That such a mild man could have such an arsenal was wild. But the affair would falter unless she could inject different excitement into their involvement. Meeting just for sex was mind-blowing boredom. Anticipation would have to be replaced. "Excuse me." A man had been glancing at her for minutes. She had encouraged him by letting the hem of her dress fall back over her knees as she sat on the high bar stool, exposing a little thigh. It was a trick she used before she was married to get free drinks. Only now she did not need the free drinks, just a break in her boredom. He was young, handsome, well-groomed and well-dressed. A dead-cert gigolo, estate agent, trader, or all three. "Aren't you Jemma Lumarine?" His chat went on about the brilliance of her husband in her background. Jemma was not listening. Jemma was computing. The necessary injection of excitement into her affair with Jerome was sitting in front of her. "Give me your card. I shall call you when I need you." Her directness blocked his spiel. With dumb obedience, he passed the card between them. "You work as far as Brighton?" He smiled. "And on the moon if there's money." She left the bar, her mind alive with new possibilities for Jerome and her new sex machine. "Where the hell have you been?" The words hit her surprise button hard. Jemma had not looked at the bed. "I said, where the fucking hell have you been?" This time the question did not ignite a stiffening fright. She continued moving towards the range of built-in wardrobes, ignoring the figure stretched across her bed. "You're not allowed in here." The bite of raw whiskey wafted into her face. Whether it was from an open bottle or from Nicholas's open mouth, she could not tell. It was 10 o'clock. Her husband should be beyond hearing, seeing, or speaking at this hour. Why wasn't he snoring his life away as usual? That he was speaking coherently established he was halfway between drunk and incapable, a dangerous state, as she had painfully discovered. The click as she opened a wardrobe door powered up 2 points on his annoyance scale. "Don't you fucking ignore me." She didn't want to speak to him, but to carry on ignoring him was asking for trouble. "I went to the cinema." She heard the slosh of the whiskey against the side of the bottle as he poured the drink down his throat. "What did you see?" She could tell him anything. He never went to the cinema and had no idea what films were showing. Summer surprise. Putting her handbag in the wardrobe and slipping out of her coat, she turned towards the door, feeling his eyes watching her movements. "Supposing I sleep here tonight?" He was looking for trouble. By being in her room, he was breaking their contract. "Then I will sleep in the spare room." Trousers, rustling against the bed covers as he swung his legs to the floor, tightened a band of panic around her throat. "Perhaps I won't sleep here after all. I'll join you in the spare room." The reflection off the raised bottle glinted in the streetlights as he took another swig. She was going to have to be careful. He was at his most dangerous when fully loaded and conscious. Then you won't be able to say we made love in your bedroom, and I won't be in any trouble. Not that I give a shit what your solicitor says. She would go to the spare room, lock the door, and stay there until morning, until the maid and cleaner came in. He tried a grab as she passed. It wasn't even necessary to run along the hall to the spare room. Their hallway was exceptionally wide, but even so he managed several bounces off opposite walls as he rolled towards her. The click as the door closed switched off her panic and loaded her horror. The keyhole winked empty. The door could not be locked. She tried to hold the knob closed with her weight wedged against the door, but 8 stones is no match for 14, especially when they're fired up with whiskey. The door bursting open threw her backwards, the bed hitting behind her knees, collapsing her onto it. The bounce, as he hit the mattress, threw her upright, but just for half a second. His hand grabbed her wrist, forcing her down. "Don't you love me, Gemma?" His face was 3 inches away. "Well, you're going to have to." Her neck hurt as she twisted her face away from his foul breath, as her blouse ripped open easily in his grasping hand. Her roll sideways was halted by a stinging slap on the side of her face as she was held on the bed by his knee in her groin. He was yelling. A jumbled mass of alcohol-soaked words drenched her. He had managed the haul, but was having trouble with his belt buckle. Gemma twisted both ways, trying to release the pain between her legs. The belt was too technical for his drunken fingers, adding frustration to his fury. "You have a fucking affair, haven't you?" Her response was instant, unthought, and repulsive. The shock and her spittle hit him right between the eyes. With a scream, Gemma dragged herself backwards across the bed and ran. Again he tried to grab as she fled past, but his booze-filled legs collapsed, sliding him under the bed. The key was in the lock of her bedroom door. Her slam and turn secured the door, but she held on tight to the doorknob, the fear shaking around her body. 1 minute, 2, and then 3, with the door quiet and still. She slowly released her grip, the bed groaning as she flopped down. There would be no follow-up to the violence in the morning. He would forget everything and life would return to near normal. But he had accused her of having an affair. For the first time. Why? What had prompted his question? Was she sending out signals? Her planning when meeting Jerome was faultless. Nicholas always slept his liquid lunch off every afternoon. He had asked no questions when she returned. She believed he had not realized she had been out. Now suddenly he suspected her affair. Perhaps Jerome was right. Perhaps her husband could read minds. But her affair had been taking place for over a month now. Nicholas must be a very slow mind reader. Maybe he was just fishing, watching for her reaction to his accusation. The morning would bring the answer. Either he would forget all about his stab, or the inquisition would continue. The crying was soft, making it seem more frightened. Roland was outside her bedroom door. Nicholas could have dragged him out of bed and was holding him, knowing she would leave her son crying. Nicholas's bottle of whiskey lay on the floor in the pool it had made for itself when it toppled over. Holding it behind her back, she quietly turned the key, took a deep breath, and slowly opened the door. The tear-streaked face looked up. He was shivering and miserable. The snores, coming from the spare room, established that the violence was over for this evening. "Daddy's drunk again, isn't he?" His skinny little arms reached up, wrenching her heart out. She closed the door, but did not lock it until he was asleep in her bed. The tears had dried, and slumber had ironed flat all his worries. She stared at her son for over an hour. Roland had to be protected from his father. She had to be protected from his father. The threat of losing her son was real. She must be very careful, but one thing is 100% certain. The situation could not go on. Jerome's hotel, a brightly painted, cheerful building smiled across the English Channel from the Brighton seafront, by just 5 yards. In fact, the receptionist confided that part of the car park at the side of the building was in neighbouring Hove. Local boundaries were of no interest to Jerome. All he knew it was quite a walk to the hotel where Gemma was staying. That was definitely in Brighton, a large luxury building opposite the old royal palace. The sting of the wind and the ozone invading his city lungs reminded Jerome just how long it had been since he had left the smoke and exposed himself to nature. The emptiness and wide expanse of the sea called for several blinks to focus eyes that never ranged much further than the nearest office block. He walked slowly, stopping several times, seemingly to look out to sea. His sweep of the flat panorama before him always finished with his gaze to his right, in the direction from where he had come. A further brief glance and he would turn and continue his walk. So far out from the centre, the esplanade was empty on both the seaside and the land side of the road. Jerome was happy that it stayed that way until he was almost in the centre of the town. He had gone to great lengths to ensure he had not been followed. At Victoria Station he had chosen the slow train to Brighton. On 3 occasions during the multiple stops the train made, he would leave the carriage and stand on the platform, watching the other passengers alight and disperse, ensuring no one who had not been waiting rejoined the train just before it left. At Brighton Station, the terminus, he sat for 10 minutes in the empty train. Outside the station he dodged down a turning and waited for any follower to turn in off the main street. He was not being followed, although a relief it added to the tangle he had created in his mind. Why? Why had he been followed in the first place, and why was he not being followed now? During the last week in London, he had not seen his stalker. His usual parking place was empty outside his house, and he was certain he had not been followed to Victoria Station. So what had changed? Perhaps he had a bug in his clothing. The thought was enough to bring a quick return to his hotel, a quick strip and a minute examination of his clothing, suitcase, shoes, telephone, and telephone. Portable telephones could be tracked. Anything that registered into a base could be tracked. Therefore Jerome could be tracked. With Nicholas's money power, he could buy those recordings. He would no longer need a human. Inescapable electronics would follow Jerome. His telephone went into the bedside table drawer. If it was stolen, Nicholas, or whoever was paying the bill to follow him, would be led a merry dance to nowhere. Gemma would not be arriving until tomorrow. With the sea mist dropping the temperature and wrinkling a chill through his light clothes, the long walk into the town was excellent exercise he would forego. He spent most of the evening staring through the bedroom window at the blackness of the sea. Since the orgy in his rear bedroom he had been wrestling with shadows. There was nothing in his relationship to Gemma that he could relate to. He was in love with her, she was not in love with him. That was the only solid piece of information he had. She needed him for sex, period. No, she needed him for her games beyond sex. Anticipation was almost a religion for her. Using sex was just her way of winding up for something more exciting. That he had been in the army, able to take orders without questioning, was a necessary talent she required for her game. Anyone could screw, but Gemma needed more. The reason she had picked him up was becoming a little clearer. Her detachment in the bedroom had hurt. Up to that moment he had dared think that perhaps his feeling would be returned. But his absence, as they fucked, he could not call it making love, took that hope, coated it with concrete and dropped it in the sea of shattered dreams. He turned on the bedroom TV, laid back on his bed with his hands behind his head and watched without seeing. The reason he was in this hotel was ridiculous. If Nicholas Loomering could see into bedrooms in London, he could see into them in Brighton. If he were that gifted, distance changed nothing. Jerome knew nothing about writing novels, but he had read enough of them to realize many stories followed the same path. He had read somewhere there were only 5 possible plots for stories. His affair with Gemma was following one of those plots, albeit with weird overtones. His logic ended there. Uniforms, anticipations, and her husband writing the plot they were living was not weird, it was astonishing. He stood up, switched off the lights, and crossed to stare again at the blackness of the sea. It was all trouble he did not need. Tomorrow he could leave the hotel, catch a train back to London, forget Gemma Lumarine and her husband who had eyes everywhere. His safe, uncommitted, reliable, stress-free life could restart, and he could lumber along until the sun stopped shining upon him. That was what he had wanted. That was the life he had created. Or had he? He could not remember creating anything after the thunderbolts of the army and his wife leaving. He had just climbed into the nearest nest he could find and hid from life. He could do it again. It worked. The last 5 years were proof. He would phone Gemma in the morning. "I want nothing more to do with your crazy life. Thanks for the fun. Bye." He could see in the black. Everything was clearer, with no distractions. He could see what he was thinking. He could see his choices. Gemma Lumarine was not his, and probably never would be. Skip forward 6 months with her, and he had no idea what sort of helter-skelter he would be plunging down. Skip forward 6 months without her, and he could tell exactly where he would be, at what time, and what he would be doing. Chop Gemma out of his mind. A slight slump bent his shoulders, and disappointment surged in his throat. Staring harder into the dark changed nothing. He loved the woman. He loved her for her beauty, elegance, excitement, intelligence. The adjectives streamed into the night like tracer bullets. But tracer bullets work both ways. Whilst you can see where they're going, the enemy can see where they're coming from. So the adjectives returned, each tugging him closer to the woman in the golden gown. He lived when he was near her. She made his heart beat faster, gave pleasure with closeness, excited him when she touched, captured with her perfume. He didn't want to jump off her helter-skelter. The thoughts tapping through his head suddenly had presence. Now the tapping was outside his head, and coming from the door. Someone was knocking on it. Someone was there. Gemma had arrived early. Snapping on the lights, his heart thumped urgently. He could not cross the room quickly enough. Gemma. The thin-faced woman standing in the door was a disappointment. She was not Gemma, not by a mile. But the tray on which she balanced 6 bottles of beer was real. The envelope that she placed on the table beside the bottles revealed his benefactor. He waited until the waitress had left before ripping it open. The card inside had just one letter, and it had been impressed by a printer. J. It could be anyone, and there was no handwriting to trace. The beer was brown ale. He did not particularly like brown ale, but that was not the point. With Gemma, he had only drunk champagne, which he also did not enjoy. But again, that was not the point. Gemma's liquid currency was champagne. How did she know he only drank beer? It had never been mentioned, and there was no one who could have told her. His bubble was beginning to shrink. He was lost. He was a practical man, hands first, head followed. He could not break a lifetime of thinking that had been fenced in by his ability. The light switch clicked off, the black opened up, focusing his thoughts again. He was in Brighton for a dirty weekend, paid for by the woman he adored in high luxury. That was all he knew, and that was all he would go along with. As agreed, he waited for her call. He was sitting opposite his hotel on the sea wall watching and listening to the seagulls chatter as they swooped hopefully around him, almost tapping him with their wings for food. He had expected an order or a command about what to wear, but Gemma's voice was thin and worried. "Could you come? Quickly. Now." Returning to the hotel to leave his telephone in his bedroom, he caught a handy bus into the centre of town. Her door was open, and she almost grabbed him as he entered the room. "Hold me," she pleaded. Almost climbing inside his jacket, she shivered into his arms. Obviously, she had just arrived. Her suitcase sat unopened on its stand, and she was still wearing her coat. "Thank God you're here." He gently eased her towards the bed. If they were laying down, he could see her face, look into her eyes. Was she shivering with passion, or was there something else? It was the wrong move. She pushed him away, shaking her head. "Jerome, I'm so frightened." And she was. Apart from her trembling, dark circles under her eyes established sleeplessness, and her grip, over-tight, pressed in tension. Before she handed it to him, the bright blue A4 folder had grabbed his eyes. It had been lying open on the bed, and he knew all about Jemma's A4 folders. They contained manuscripts from her husband. The first few words were enough. Clawing in, they gripped his reason and paralyzed his logic, leaving a dumb, disbelieving stare. She took his hand as he forced his gaze forward over the description of their lust in his back bedroom. The mechanics and the physical roughhouse fitted, but the Bren gun, the armory, Field Marshal Montgomery and Sir Winston Churchill were missing. It was a children's bedroom the characters were trashing, and it was not a neighbour's shout that killed the action, but the woman's child entering the room. The story could have been a classic coincidence. In a love story, characters make love, but this scene matched theirs in one penetrating detail. Disappointment. Nicholas Lumarine had hammered out the man's disappointment caused by the detachment of his mistress throughout their passion battle, in detail, over a complete page. The description of the business centre, the sparse office, their conversation ran mockingly across the pages, the last two words stabbing Jerome between his eyes. "To Brighton." Jerome gaped. Still holding his hand, Jemma stared at the manuscript. "He fell asleep across his computer. I didn't see it until yesterday." Her eyes linked with his. "I can't stay. He knows we are here." He caressed the back of her neck as she fell into his arms. Loops of worry strangled clear thought, disbelief eroding any solutions. The mess inside his head was suddenly paralyzed. Two heavy knocks on the door snapped them both upright. Gemma's warning finger to her lips as she crossed the room was unnecessary. Quickly he crawled across the bed to vanish on the floor, the opposite side of the room as the door clicked open. "Hello?" Jerome stiffened. That was a lascivious hello, an oily hello, a dirty weekend at Brighton hello. "Oh," Gemma's groan was a mix of fatigue and surprise. "Come in." Jerome lay still. This was not room service. "Look, I really cannot handle you right now." Jerome risked a slow rise of his head above the bed. A handsome young man, slim, clean, and well-groomed, stood easily in the doorway. His positives cheapened by the negatives of expensive gold ornaments littered around his body. A chunky gold bracelet weighed on one wrist. A huge barnacle of a watch with more dials than a power station balanced the vulgarity. A neck chain glittered across his open-necked shirt, and a gold earring advertised a pirate who had lost his ship. Jemma, bent over her bag, was fumbling out her wallet. Two £50 notes appeared and were pressed into the young man's hand. "I've come all the way from fucking London for you, lady." His long earring waggled with annoyance. Jemma sighed, dug out another note and pushed it into his hand. "More." Now he was threatening. Jerome rose slowly from behind the bed. His stare at the young man was not affectionate. The gigolo stiffened. A man rising out of nowhere, his gig cancelled, and now the man moving towards him were not good. This guy looked a bit handy, a big bit handy. The silence in the room was telling him to be positive. He looked at the three notes at his hand, at the big man, and made what he considered a healthy decision. "Just leave me out next time." He would have added, "you bitch," but preferred to keep his skin cover intact, and, to prevent any surprise attacks, he quickly closed the door. "Just a gigolo." Jemma pushed her bag aside, holding her arms towards him. "Oh, Jerome, don't look at me like that." A gigolo. A surprise. She slipped into his chest. I thought a threesome would liven up the weekend. The roller coaster was starting again and Gemma was driving. What would be her next trick? What did he say to a woman he loved, bringing a third party into their bedroom? Her step back surprised him. He was held at arm's length, her eyes searching his face. We must not get bored with each other. They sat on the bed. She was explaining Nicholas's story, but he was not listening. Her sexual detachment and the gigolo, that she used gigolos, was punching his head out. Where was he in all this? Jerome, you're a big boy, think about it. What the hell was he supposed to think about? A threesome? What would it be next week? A foursome? And the week after a fivesome? By Christmas, he wouldn't be able to get into the bedroom. Gemma and Jerome are turning the tables on Nicholas, and Gemma's sexual demands are becoming more demanding in the next episode of Imagine in 2 weeks.